We're going to get going on time. If you don't mind, mute your microphones. And I put in the chat, feel free to ask any questions you may have as we go through everything. And then at the end of this, we have time for Q&A. So I do want to get started. I'm thrilled. As you can see, we have Lori Cassidy and Stephanie Deaton with us from Royal and Norwegian. We wanted to give you some ideas on where we've been, where we are, where we're going, have a live conversation going on here. And feel free to, by the way, at the end here, if you've got something you want to ask of someone, please do live if you'd like. But we're going to jump right into this because first and foremost, thank you. We're very excited that you joined us. We are so glad to see the interest in cruising. We are coming back. It is going to happen. We're quite excited to share with you some context surrounding where we were, where we are, and more importantly, or as importantly, where we're going. So what I wanted to start with is really just to establish a little bit of context. And for those of you who know cruising, you know how incredibly well the industry was growing year after year after year in every segment: ocean, river, expedition, et cetera. And as an example of that, in 2019, and just to sort of establish where we came from, we had over 30 million cruise passengers sailing on over 300 ships, and that equated to around $37 billion worldwide in revenue. And that was just going to increase with more ships coming, more excitement around the cruise industry. And then as 2020 began in January, February, the year started out with all kinds of optimism. It was just incredible to see the continued growth in cruise. And then, of course, we all know what happened. So it's literally been just about a year ago, March 13th to be exact, when the cruise industry voluntarily paused worldwide cruising. And that was, as we all know, a result of the pandemic, when pretty much everything stopped at that point. And the important part that we want to go back, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the backwards because we want to spend more time, obviously, on where we're going and what we know. But the important part is to put this in context because of what was reported in the media. And unfortunately, and as I'm sure you all know, the cruise industry was a bit of a poster child for some things that were going on in Asia at the time. And in all fairness, nobody knew at that point what we were dealing with. But what we did know is that, let me back up a second, the ship was under the jurisdiction of the Asian government. And without knowing exactly what they were dealing with, they made the determination to keep everybody on board. And what I'm referring to is the ship that we all saw all over the news. And what they did was keep everybody on board versus disembarking and isolating on shore. But the ships immediately did what they know how to do, which is mitigate virus. They know how to do that. If you think about norovirus, which most people who have cruised will be familiar with, they did exactly what they knew to do to shut it down. But at that time, and in all fairness, nobody knew what this was. They didn't know how the virus was passed. Social distancing wasn't enforced. Mask wearing wasn't enforced or known. So it's very important that we all know that, unfortunately, that ship was probably the first thing we saw en masse in the news about COVID and this pandemic. And what happened wasn't necessarily anything more than a lot of unknowns, and then it was shut down. So I just want to try to establish some context around that because we all saw it, we all know what happened. So moving forward from there, what we want to take you to is a lot of things happened last year. There were ships sailing. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. There are ships sailing now, and I know you're all very interested in what's happening and what happened as a result of that. So where I want to stop for a moment is just to let you know, and sorry to reiterate this, but there was an awful lot out of context as reported in the media. Our job is to try to establish proper facts for you, give you information so that you can carry forward with cruises going forward, which hopefully this information today is going to give you the ability to do. So with that, and again, ask any questions as we go through, and I'll keep track of them in the chat. But what we want to do now is that establishes the past a bit. And then I wanted to ask Lori if you could chime in here and kind of take us from, we did the global suspension voluntarily with the cruise industry. We all know what happened there. What happened next?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Karen. And good afternoon to everyone who joined us today. We sincerely appreciate everyone's interest in our return to service. And like all of you, we too can't wait to get back to sailing and delivering exceptional events for you and your guests. So, as Karen mentioned earlier, it's almost 1 year to the day that the cruise industry voluntarily suspended all global operations due to COVID. And it was actually Friday, March 13th to be exact. You know, in our wildest dreams, we could never have imagined that we would suspend service for 1 month, which was the initial suspension period, let alone now 1 year. This has been a truly unprecedented situation for all of us. Now, the day following our voluntary suspension, which was March 14th, the CDC issued an official no sail order for all US cruise operations through April the 9th, which then ultimately resulted in additional suspension extensions through October 30th. So for all of those on the call today and those who might be unaware, the cruise industry is the only hospitality sector that is federally regulated by the CDC due to the fact that all of our vessels are internationally flagged. Thus, we must adhere to their guidance and they must sign off on us returning to service. This is very different from hotels, resorts, and even theme parks, you know, most of which have been, you know, open during the pandemic. And the reason for this is that they are not federally regulated, but they are state regulated. And thus they follow a different set of rules than the cruise industry has to follow. So let's talk about what happened next. Well, quickly after the no sail order was put into effect, 2 of the largest cruise operators, Royal Caribbean Group, which I represent, and Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings, which Stephanie represents, we partnered together. And in July of 2020, we announced the formation of the Healthy Sail Panel. This is a team of cross-disciplinary experts which were enlisted to guide the entire cruise industry's way forward in response to COVID. The panel was tasked with collaboratively developing recommendations on a science-backed plan for a healthy return to service that ensures the well-being of all of our guests, our crew, and all the communities that we visit. Now, interesting to note that both RCG, Royal Caribbean Group, and NCLH early on said that our work, which was really our findings and our recommendations that come forward from our panel, will be an open source for adoption by any company or industry that would benefit from the panel's scientific and medical insights. And, you know, more to come on that in a minute. But let me first take you down the path of who's on the panel, because I'm sure you're all curious who was on this Healthy Sail panel, and it's quite impressive to say the least. So the panel, first of all, is co-chaired by Governor Leavitt. Many of you may know him, the former Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and also Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who is the former Commissioner of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Now, the remainder of the panel, which you can see on the slide, you can see their faces and their names, is comprised of globally recognized experts from a wide variety of disciplines, including public health, infectious disease, biosecurity, maritime operations, and of course, you know, the hospitality industry. Now, you may also be curious as to what has the panel been working on for all of these months, right? It's been quite some time. Well, I can tell you that they have been extremely busy, yet at the same time, they are being methodical and thoughtful in their approach to ensure when we do return to service that we get it right. And it is the most comprehensive, multi-layered plan that is best in class in the entire hospitality industry. There is nothing, hands down, that's more important to us in the industry than the health and safety of all of our guests and our crew members. Okay, so in a nutshell, there were initially 5 key areas of focus for our panel, which include, number 1, mitigation. And this comprises testing, screening, you know, how do we actually reduce and eliminate the virus from being brought on board? Okay. Number 2 is the transmission of the virus. So we did extensive reviews of our air quality and filtration systems, our sanitation processes and products that are being used. You know, how do we take what we already do so well with virus mitigation and take it to the next level? We reviewed social distancing practices and even our ship and venue capacities. You know, what adjustments need to be made to adhere to the return to service protocols? And of course, mobilization, which is critical. This is our response and our action plan should there be an isolated COVID case or a larger breakout on board the ships. I can tell you that the #1 concern of guests, should there be an outbreak, is will the entire ship have to go in lockdown, right? And this is not something we ever want to have to do. Thus, why a robust, multifaceted contingency plan is being created. We also have to evaluate all of our destination experiences. You know, if you think about it, we go to we sail out of hundreds of ports, right, of home ports, and we sail to hundreds and hundreds of ports of call throughout the world. This in itself is a massive undertaking when you think about the review process that has to take place for that. So with that said, I can tell you that this panel is leaving no stone unturned. They have had the time to do extensive research and analysis, and as new learnings of the virus and its transmission are shared, as well as the impact of the vaccine now, the panel is pivoting to ensure all of this information is weaved into our final return to service protocols and guidelines. And most importantly, is that these protocols limit the impact to you and your guests in having one heck of a fabulous experience on board our cruises. Okay, so I mentioned a little bit earlier that we broadly shared our findings and recommendations with other cruise brands. Well, the good news is that several cruise lines took these recommendations and began sailing successfully in Europe last year, and they are continuing to do so currently. So interesting fact, we're gonna show this slide, is that post-March of 2020, which is when the shutdown took place, over 350,000 guests have sailed utilizing these enhanced protocols.
Wow.
Okay,
No idea.
now, unfortunately, the media here in the US has not focused on these successes, but the good news for all of you today is that the recommended and the implemented protocols have worked, and ships have continued to sail successfully internationally without significantly impacting the guest experience. This, for sure, is a positive step forward for all of us.
Yeah, and that's what we wanted to make sure that you're aware of, because as Lori just said, you know, unfortunately, the media hasn't picked up all the successes. They've unfortunately picked up the handful of things that happened as everybody was learning what they were dealing with and how to properly manage that. So what I also wanted to say here is we started a series last summer called Reality versus Perception. If anybody is interested in that, it literally established facts as they were known every step of the way to ensure that people knew if they saw something reported, what was accurate and what were the actual facts behind that. So if anybody's interested in that, we'll be happy to share that, because we cataloged that through the whole process. So we're obviously very excited that there are ships sailing and that have sailed and successfully. And it just gives us a bit of a snapshot of what's to come. And what I really want you to be aware of, because this is very telling, and one of the points that we made in that Reality versus Perception series, there was an article that came out late last year, actually, that was from the health and safety company that Four Seasons, JW, and Fairmont, among others, were utilizing to point them in the forward direction. That company literally said that they were looking to what the cruise industry used to do, much less what we're going to do going forward, but what they used to do to establish their protocols going forward. That's huge for the cruise industry, right? Because those of you who have cruised know what some of those protocols have been, and the fact that we now have major hotel companies looking to that for what they should be doing going forward speaks volumes for the cruise industry. So just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. And then we're going to flip it to Stephanie for a couple minutes to take us kind of through last fall and then forward. So Steph, go right ahead.
So let's start September 2020, the Healthy Sail Panel released its recommendations for all the cruise lines to safely resume operations. This was a 60-page document with 72 recommended protocols. This is no joke. We've read through it. I feel like we all spent a weekend reading through it. It's a lot of stuff and it's really great. It's really great stuff. And then shortly after that, at the end of December, the CDC rescinded their no sail order for US sailings. So then that was replaced with the framework for conditional sailing order. So each cruise line then reviewed the order to develop their own comprehensive return to service plan, which was largely based on those 74 recommendations. And these were all submitted to the CDC, and the cruise lines continue having weekly calls with the CDC to review and finalize each phase of the return to sail plan. So the kind of like the magic 8 ball here is this is ever changing, and some of these current protocols, they could change. For example, if every single person on the ship is vaccinated, are we going to require social distancing? Are we going to require masks? I don't know. So a lot of this, I'm sure you're going to have some questions that, and I'll be honest, at the end, we may not be able to give you a definite answer, but know that, you know, it's ever changing, and phase 1 may include these protocols. Phase 2 may be lighter. Phase 3 may be nothing. It just depends on, honestly, the vaccine, really, and how many people are vaccinated and what the CDC recommends. And I think, Lori, you wanted to chit chat about a technology update with Muster 2.0.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you know, I think our entire industry, if you look at the growth of our industry, that's the new ship order is incredible. You know, we are not slowing down, and I think Karen's going to mention some points at the end. But our entire industry is constantly looking at new ways to advance the cruise experience on every level, and you know, technology is a key component to that. You know, our mantra at, you know, Royal Caribbean Group is continuous improvement, you know, which includes developing new experiences, new solutions to make every guest's vacation that more memorable, right? And, you know, digital innovations are at the forefront and are being designed to, you know, eliminate what has typically been considered the primary pain points of travel. And I think all of us know what they are, right? It's long lines, it's crowds, and it's paper. You know, how do we move from paper to digital? So last year, almost right after the suspension period, we announced what we call our reimagined safety drill, which is called Muster 2.0. The safety drill, I think you'll all agree, is one of the least loved, but one of the most important parts of the cruise vacation. Safety is key, right? This is now being transformed from guests having to meet in a specified area with a large group of other guests to a faster, more personal approach so that guests can complete the muster drill at their leisure or on their own time. And it's done via our Royal app. Okay. Now there are many other features of this Royal mobile app, you know, like expedited boarding. You can schedule your arrival times to the terminal. We have digital stateroom keys now, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of functionality to this app, and Muster 2.0 happens to be one of them. So that's pretty exciting and pretty cool. We haven't really been able to implement it other than on one ship that is sailing right now, but it's something that I think people are going to be looking forward to as we resume sailing. Now, another super exciting innovation, which is currently being tested on our ship, the Quantum of the Seas, which is currently sailing from Singapore. It's been sailing since December of 2020 on short cruises, is what we call the Tracelet technology. And this actually monitors physical distancing and allows us to trace individuals. This is a wearable device, so it's like a bracelet, right? That connects to our app, which is called Trace Together, pretty cool name. And it utilizes artificial intelligence to rapid trace guest movement and contact. So it's pretty cool. It's a really exciting development that I think the CDC is also watching the success of this to see, is this something that could be implemented on a broader scale, throughout the entire cruise industry. So, we're really excited about this, and, more to come on this technology as we continue to unveil its success stories.
I think another point a really important point that we want to share is there's often a misconception about the air on board cruise ships. While it was always wonderful, we have, cruise lines in general are all enhancing their filtration systems. So we're enhancing them with hospital grade filters. So this is making essentially the interior air quality the equivalent of that of open air spaces. So how are we doing that? I'm not going to give you the boring details, but we do have a 3-minute video that we're happy to share with you that goes through the step-by-step of how the air is purified. But basically the outside fresh air is purified up to 99.92% through bipolar ionization, which essentially eliminates viruses and bacteria before the purified air is distributed throughout the ship. So this is outside fresh air coming in, being purified, and then distributed throughout the ship. So you can't get much cleaner than that.
Yeah, and Steph,
cleaner than clean air.
We love clean air. Yeah, and Steph, if I can piggyback on that, because we just announced this, I think it was like last week, but there was an independent assessment that was conducted by, I think it was the University of Nebraska Medical Center. And they did a test on one of our vessels, the Oasis of the Seas, which is a ship that was built in 2009, right? But it's a massive vessel. And the findings were based on the scientist study, of the HVAC system on board the ship. And the study found that the HVAC system's layers of protection make the transmission of these aerosol particles, which are like particles from coughing, between spaces extremely low to virtually impossible to transmit. So the studies that they're doing on all these new vessels, and when you think about it, Oasis is now what, a 12-year-old vessel, and there's been so many new builds that have come out since then. So it's a really good news story for people that are concerned that they think they're in a contained environment on board a cruise ship, when the fact of the matter is that the air is fabulous and the transmission levels are extremely low. So good news story there too.
Yeah, and that's what, again, we want to make sure that you're all aware that, and it's kind of what I mentioned a minute ago relative to the hotel company that was looking at what the cruises had done and look at what they're already doing. So we're trying to give you a snapshot into what was already established and what was known in the cruise industry and what the next level of this is going to be. And I'm going to talk about that more in a second. But what we also wanted to make sure we talked about a little bit was, so we kind of gave you the background a bit, kind of what's been going on for the last year. And we all know that anybody with a cruise program, was impacted. And Stephanie, do you want to maybe talk about that a little bit as to what was done and how it was done relative to the group and incentive market?
Yeah, I haven't had children, but for some reason I feel like this is childbirth and we don't remember how bad it was. And I know that every single one of you went through this with us in one way or another, whether it was through a hotel, an event. We were just all trying to navigate our new normal. We learned a lot during the first 3 months. We learned a lot of patience, a lot of patience, a lot of flexibility, a lot of not day drinking, but maybe right at 5:30, just because it was so stressful. But we were scrambling, and the hotels as well, scrambled their 2020 groups and charters to the following year. Well, that was great until the domino effect happened, where clients who had land programs in 20 that their only option was to move them to 21. So then to a future year, 22 or 23. And I would say, while every cruise line has its own offer, I think that we all have the best, we shared the same goal, which was to do the best for our customer. In some cases, it wasn't possible, but where we could, I can assure you, we fought tooth and nail to make sure our customers got what they wanted. And so fast forward to today, we're starting to see more new bookings, which is exciting, not just not just rebookings from future cruise credits or stuff that got canceled and they're starting to look, these are brand new bookings, and that's really exciting for us. It's just starting to get better, and so we're really excited.
Yeah, and I think what we want to establish here is, well, I mean, I keep saying that, but it's just so important that you know the history of this, how remarkable it is that these two brands came together and formed this healthy sail panel, and the experts behind that, and the leaders in technology, and how we're going forward. It's critically important that you know that, because we also recognize that, you know, the perception of cruise needs to be backed up with facts going forward. We want to ensure that you have those facts to be comfortable presenting cruise as we go forward. There are so many questions about the protocols, and what we want you all to know, and we're so appreciative that you did this with us today, because we are going to invite you all back to a very specific, we'll call it Return to Service 2.0. But we want to invite you all back when we have these specific protocols that are approved. We're ready to roll. We know what's happening. We know when the ships are going back in and where, and we will invite you all back to that, because again, we want to make sure that you're on the forefront of this. You've all been incredibly supportive of cruise over the years, and it's just important. I can't stress that enough, that you have some facts, and you know, we're all chomping at the bit to have that information. And to the point made earlier, that's where it won't happen until it's safe to do so, deemed safe to do so, and all the boxes are checked. That is well in progress, as you've hopefully heard today. And as soon as we have the details of that, we will be right back to you on it. So what I wanted to share with you kind of in closing is, I mentioned in the beginning the success and the excitement of the cruise industry and the growth. But what a lot of people don't realize is, even last year in 2020, a year that we're all going to not want to say anymore for too much longer, if ever, there was still 16 ships that were delivered last year. That's incredible, right? I mean, yes, they were ordered in years prior, but they still were delivered last year. In addition to that, there are 19 more currently slated to be delivered this year. So the industry is continuing to grow, and you're going to see that new announcements. You've already seen some, but it's in all market segments. It's ocean, it's river, it's expedition. So stay tuned for that. And then one more piece of really fun news is, as of the end of last week, there are 107 new ships on the new ship order book coming out in the next 7 years. So there's tremendous, you know, growth, excitement, financial stability, et cetera, as there always was. That is continuing in the cruise industry. And our job here is to make sure you know that. Make sure you know the facts, the figures, what's happening and when. So that's why we wanted to get you all together to give you an idea, because there's been so many questions about, you know, the industry, what happened, when's it coming back, what will it be going forward. And I want to jump for a second here to a couple questions that I think this is a good time to answer that came in the chat. And Lori and Stephanie, please chime in with this too. But we knew that you would ask, and a couple of you have, relative to vaccine, and will the ships require vaccine? And what I think I want to say this part, and ladies, please chime in. The honest answer right now is don't know yet, because is it the ships that would require a vaccine, or could it be the ports of call, depending on where in the world the ships may be going and what is required for entry? So with a lot of people, I have likened this a little bit to 9/11, in that, you know, after 9/11, we all said, well, what do you mean 3-ounce bottles? And what do you mean we have to take our shoes off, and so on? And what was TSA that didn't exist prior to that? And we all did it because we want to travel. And to the point that I think Stephanie just made, everybody does want to travel. So what do we have to do going forward isn't necessarily going to be indicative of just the cruise industry. It might be the travel industry. So again, stay tuned for that, because there's a lot more coming. So I know some cruise lines have announced that they would require vaccine. Doesn't mean the entire industry will. And ladies, I don't know if you want to chime in on that a little bit, or if that's enough said, but let me know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's an individual cruise line mandate. I don't think that it's going to be something that the CDC requires, but again, to be determined.
Right. Lori, anything on that?
No, I mean, I completely agree as well. You know, one point that I do want to share with everyone, you know, because I'm sure this is on everybody's mind, is, well, when do you think you're going to be back in service? And, you know, it is like a puzzle, and, you know, you have to look at the world. And because in the US, we are under the thumb of the CDC. I think what you're going to see is a resumption of service in other parts of the world. Like, for example, we're already in Singapore. There are cruises operating in Europe right now. I think you're going to see regional cruising come back prior to the US, because if you look at the conditional framework sale order that was put forward by the CDC, one of the stipulations in there, which is still being talked through, is what is called simulation voyages, right? So every cruise line, every cruise ship has to go through a test period in the water with the new protocols before the ship can resume revenue service. So there's a little bit of a process ahead of us that we have to deal with. And again, this is continuing to evolve daily, weekly, as we get updates from the conversations that are going on, you know, between the Healthy Sail Panel and the CDC and our cruise line executives.
Yeah, and with that too, is it's important, again, that you know you've got people to reach out to. Please do that. You all have connections. You have expert cruise resources with our cruise partners, with your fellow hospitality partners. Please utilize that, because first and foremost, we want you to be armed with proper information so that when it is time for you to consider a cruise, the last thing we want is for somebody to say, oh, no, that's not safe, or oh, no, I saw this or that in the media. That's why we wanted to arm you with some really good information to go forward. So, you know, please do reach out to any cruise expert to help you with that. There's a lot of documented information, including what we have today. This session has also been recorded, so should you want to share that with any of your team or colleagues, please let us know that. And there's one more question that came in that I wanted to toss to Stephanie and Lori, and that basically, from both of you, if you don't mind, is we know that from an individual perspective, and that's something, I'm sorry, I think Stephanie mentioned, is literally from an individual perspective, you know, there's a ton of interest. People are, and I will say, people are lined up to get back on ships. And obviously people who cruise regularly, and they can't wait to be back on board. They want to be part of those test cruises, et cetera. So what I wanted to know, ladies, if you don't mind chiming in and just saying, what are you seeing? What are you seeing interest, even with the ships not back in the water? I know what we're seeing is a lot of interest. Optimism has returned. And are you seeing the same?
Absolutely. I think people cannot wait to travel again. We're so tired of being in lockdown in our homes. It's not even funny. But yes, we just this week shared a statistic. I think we're seeing like a 30% year-over-year increase in bookings right now. Now, this is really for, you know, for retail, for the trade. This is for, you know, individual travelers, and some group business, not necessarily for our segment of business, which is kind of slower out of the gate, which is understandable, correct? Now, not to say that we are sitting here quiet, because we're not. We have started to see an uptick in RFPs come our way for meeting and incentive groups. So that's a really good news story, right? And I think there is going to be a huge pent up demand. We're seeing it already, for bookings are off the charts right now for 22, and even moving into 23. So positive things are starting to happen. That is for sure. And I think every week it gets better and better.
Yeah. I think also once we have an official return to sail, and our clients, our past clients, or even new clients see us in the water and see how, you know, the protocols are working, then it's going to get even better. It's going to, you know, reestablish confidence. So yeah, like Lori said, every week is a little bit more encouraging.
Yeah, and the beauty of what we all get to do in this side of the industry is everything we work on is for the future. And I think that's evidenced by the RFPs that we're seeing come in, the interest in cruise that we're getting, the questions that are being asked. There's enough positive momentum now, it seems, with you know, travel in general. People are chomping at the bit, as Lori said, to get out again. So, you know, we want to help you with that for sure. We want you to be aware, and I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, but it's just so important that you know there's really good facts to back up all of this. Those can be sent to you at any point. We just want to make sure that you have confidence in presenting cruise as we go forward, backed up by science, backed up by technology, backed up by evidence of what's been going on and what is going on now. I haven't seen, and we won't keep you but more than another minute. I don't know if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question, or if there's anything else we can answer, please go right ahead.
Syra, I have a question. I'm driving, that's why I'm not typing, sorry.
Go ahead.
My question is that I know the hotels are taking groups that, you know, they have the limit that, you know, 50% or something like that. So the cruise lines are going to follow the same, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. It's a great question. What I can tell you is I mentioned earlier that we do have a ship sailing in Singapore right now since December. It's been operating at 50% capacity with protocols in place, okay? The good news, because it's been operating so successfully, we're in conversation right now with the Singapore government to increase the capacity levels to 65%. And we just got approval to extend our sailings now through June of 21. So I do believe most likely when you know, it really depends. I think you're gonna see a decrease in capacity for sure, okay? Probably with a starting point at 50%. But again, it really depends on the impact that this vaccine has on everything, you know, because that could change things dramatically.
And quickly.
So, you know, and I think that's why, and this is a really important fact, you know, a lot of people say, why have you not announced your return to service protocols? You know, because there were different hotel companies, and I think maybe 1 or 2 lines might have come out and shared some protocols over the course of the last 9 months, right? The reason why we haven't is because there was so much that was still unknown, right? We didn't know how this virus was being transmitted. And if you think about it, look how much we've learned over the course of the past year, and look how many things have changed. We would have had to rip up that paper and redo it, to be quite honest with you.
Right.
So it's really a good news story because we are taking a slow, methodical approach in what we put forward out there. And we want to make sure it's done properly. And I promise everybody on this phone, once we have the protocols, we're going to be telling you all about it. You'll be the first to know.
The rooftops.
Exactly.
For sure.
Go
You're
ahead,
going to be
Steph.
bombarded by e-blasts, phone calls. We're going to skywrite it, whatever it takes.
Yeah, yeah. So
Another
it's not like
question
we're trying to hide anything. It's just that, you know, it has to be signed off on too.
Sure.
It's really, really important. So
Another question
good.
that just came up is, would the decrease in occupancy, or sorry, with the decrease in occupancy, is there also a decrease in onboard services? Does anybody know the answer to that? Okay,
Yeah, no.
Absolutely not.
excellent.
Now, keep in mind, the decrease in capacity, again, depending on the vaccine, could be very short-lived, right?
Well,
I think
and-
you're going to see that at least for 21,
Yeah.
right? And, you know, the hope is that we're back to some level of normalcy in 22.
Yeah.
Well, and as rapid, I want to go back to what you just said a minute ago, Lori, because as rapid as this has, we've all seen how rapid this has changed literally in the last month, right? 2 months, week, whatever. So again, stay tuned. I mean, we're going to literally be screaming from the rooftops about this as soon as we know more. And that's why we wanted to bring you all together to make sure that, you know, watch out for that save the date 2.0, so to speak, because we will get that out to you guys right away as soon as we have that. But just stay tuned because it's gonna happen quickly, likely as said, with social distancing and other mandates in place. But once it happens, as we've been seeing with the vaccine rollout, it'll be quick. So do we have any other questions?
Just want to clarify the question. This is Ira again. Sorry. That it's not only the capacity that we're approving. What about the lowest number or the highest number of the group that you can accept once we start looking through?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
I think she mentioned, is there going to be a maximum size group that we will accept on board the cruise ships?
Right.
Not necessarily. I mean, if you look at it, if you have, let's say, a 4,000 passenger vessel and we can only sail with 2,000, of course, there's going to be a percentage of groups in there and a percentage of individuals in there. So it is something that we revenue manage. So I won't necessarily say that, you know, we have any limitations on the size of a group, because we don't. Now, here's something to be mindful of, though, is that you have to look at our venues and our meeting space and conference centers on board. If physical distancing is in effect, which it will be initially, right? A lounge that typically holds 1,000 may only be able to accommodate 400 to 500. So these are things we have to take into consideration when we are securing your venue space for you.
The other thing I want to ask, because I think it's a great follow-up to that, is what I've seen so far when we've been placing groups is the group is taken into consideration against the overall occupancy of the vessel relative to social distancing. Is that accurate?
Well, I think that for us, I mean, most of our groups are not requesting stuff for 2021. They're looking at 22, 23, 24. So we don't have any restrictions on the number of the size of the group. So I think for this group, I don't think any of you are looking at anything before 2022. So
Yeah, and then they're safe.
that we don't have any specific guidelines. Now, you know, that could change, but I don't think so.
Yeah,
Perfect.
and same here. 22 and forward, we're operating currently and securing, you know, commitments now as if it's business as usual. But for 21, because there are groups that have stayed the course with us for 21,
Yep.
right? So we may have to pivot a little bit and make some adjustments, but a lot of these conversations are already happening.
Right.
And of course, if it doesn't meet, you know, the satisfaction of the client, we're going to work with them to move them, right? So.
Awesome. Anybody else with a question? Okay, well, with that, feel free to let us know. You have the email address for the call. Let us know any questions. If you're interested in the recording, we're happy to send it. And as we said, stay tuned for Return to Service 2.0. With that, Lori, Stephanie, thank you so much for being here with us today. Appreciate the time, all of you from FICP. Thank you very, very much. And stay tuned for more to come very soon. As our hashtag says, we will return soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.